You want to learn how to use Duik Ángela, and I know you're serious about it because you saw the length of this video and you clicked on it anyway. I'm excited to teach you it. I'm not going to waste any of your time, and it really does take this much time to get a good grasp on how to use Duik, especially as a beginner, to get up and running and start animating characters in After Effects. I'm going to teach you how to prep your artwork for rigging, get it into After Effects, create a skeleton system that can be rigged with Duik, and how to use Duik's automatic walk and run cycles. What I've done is set up 2 different character designs that you can download. Follow along with me, and you can even download my project file and dig around through it yourself. I've added chapters to every part of this video, so if there's a section that you think you already understand or something that you want to jump around to, just use those chapters to do it. But enough talk, let's get into it. I've created 2 different character designs to be rigged with Duik, and you can download both of them. Just follow the link in the description. You could also use your own artwork, but there are definitely some design considerations that you need to make before you go to rig inside of After Effects. And especially if you don't have any experience rigging, then just go ahead and use my character designs because I've made them very specifically, and I want to walk you through what exactly that looks like. So on each of these characters, there's a layer at the top called guides, and you'll notice that there are just these circles on all of the joints of each character. These are very important for rigging in order to make joints very seamless, because if I grab this arm and maybe the hand too, and then move the anchor point to the center of that circle and then rotate it, you'll notice that the bend in the elbow is perfect. You can't see any kind of seam or anything misaligning, whereas if I were to move that anchor point to say about here and then rotate, well, now we're gonna have some problems, and this is going to come up much further along in the rigging process than you wanna deal with, to have to come all the way back to the drawing board and modify your artwork and then re-rig everything. So it is very important that as a beginner, your joints are perfectly circular. Once you get into more advanced rigging, you can mess with the shape of those joints. But for this tutorial and for most clean looking character designs, you're gonna want those perfectly circular joints. And if I press Control or Command Y to switch to outline view, you'll notice that there are perfect circles all throughout my character design at all of those joints, even between the hips and the torso. Now, another thing you need to think about is how big should your character be? What is the resolution that you want to work at? I've made my artboard 2000 by 2000. So if I were to make a rectangle, and I'll make it 1920 by 1080 so I can see an HD frame, I'll switch that to outline. This is what my character is going to look like within a 1920 by 1080 frame at 100% scale. Meaning if I were to zoom in to crop maybe to just the torso of this character, I'm going to switch my view in Illustrator to the pixel preview right here, and then zoom in, and you'll notice we're not gonna get very good resolution. And you might think, well, this is Illustrator artwork. It can just convert it to shape layers or continuously rasterize those layers. Don't get in that mindset. Think of these as flat layers. With rigging in After Effects and using Duik, it's gonna get complicated and even break things if you use shape layers or continuously rasterize. So just think of Illustrator as if this is a flat image, not vector artwork, and create your character at whatever resolution you need for the maximum amount of basically cropping in. So if I wanted to be able to crop in to just this amount of my character, I'm gonna have to scale him up much larger, and that's fine. You can work with the 4000 by 4000 pixel comp, and After Effects will handle that. It might take longer to render, but it's necessary if you wanna have clean artwork at 100% scale. Now again, for this tutorial, I don't need that, so I'm gonna leave it where it was. But another thing that's very important to do is labeling your layers properly, just like Ben Marriott would want it. In order to make the rigging process as simple as possible using Duik, we're going to need to label our layers properly. So I've named everything how you'd expect it to, and I've used R for right, L for left, and I've labeled my limbs according to the character's side. So right arm would be the character's right arm, what we're seeing as the left side of the screen. That little bit isn't as critical, but it makes the most sense in my head, so work with whatever way makes sense to you. The important thing is that you actually label everything properly, and you can use underscores, dashes, whatever you want, but this is how I like to format my layers. So our toes, our foot, our calf. Follow this naming structure, and rigging with Duik is gonna be much simpler. Another thing you need to think about is what should the range of motion be for your character? What does it actually need to be able to do? Should it be able to do a walk cycle, or is it just gonna be a character standing there looking at their phone? The way that you illustrate your character and the pose that you put them in is going to limit or extend what they're able to do once you go to rig them. I've used a 3/4 pose kind of for both of these rigs, and you can do a lot with that type of pose. You'll notice that their feet are not perfectly aligned, their shoulders are at an angle, it's offset, so it can give the character more range, allow them to look off to the side or at the camera. It can also work for walk cycles, although if all you're trying to do is create a walk cycle, you might want to do a completely profile view where they're looking straight to one side. For Reese, this character right here, I made a neck that's able to bend, and you'll see with that outline view, there's a rotation point here and here for the head to rotate around the neck, but also if I were to grab all of these together, I could rotate the neck around that joint. Now on Becky, I designed her in a way that made that a little bit more difficult because her neck really tapers up at the top. So instead of trying to modify my artwork to fit that type of a movement, I just made the conscious decision that I don't need to be able to rotate her neck around there. That's kind of a weird movement anyway. I don't know that I really would ever need to move her neck in that way. So instead, I kept the design the way that I wanted it to and decided I'm just gonna rotate her head around that neck joint instead of the entire thing with the neck being able to move as well. So before bothering with setting up all these perfect joints and everything, think about what the range of motion your character should be and design accordingly. Also, don't try to overcomplicate things. Keep your designs very simple. These characters are actually pretty complex. Even though they are clean, simple looking designs, they are kind of complex when it comes to how many joints there are and how everything works together. So don't overcomplicate your designs. One last little tip while we're still in Illustrator is to give your limbs a little bit of a bend. It's okay to actually pose your character, and you can see that on this character over here a little more. I spread out her legs. This one is slightly bent. If you give a little bit of bend to the limb, that's gonna help Duik know which way you want the arm or the leg to bend once it's rigged. This again is not essential, but if you do this little step in the character design phase, it's just gonna make things even simpler once we're in After Effects. The first thing I want to do is rearrange my workspace because with rigging and character animation, you're going to be dealing with lots of layers and you need to see most of them at the same time. So I'm going to completely rearrange my entire workspace right now. And I'm even going to go ahead and remove myself because we need as much space as possible. So I'm going to close that out. And the first thing I'll do is grab my timeline. And the way I like to work is putting this all the way on the left side of my workspace where you see that green highlight so that it's docked on the left side. That way, all of my layers are going to have all of this vertical space to work with. Next, I'm going to close the panels I don't need, like the character panel. I'm not going to be doing anything like that, so I'll close all of these up. I'll keep my composition docked over here and close out these other two panels. My project and effect controls, those are important, so I'll keep them there. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as a new workspace. If I come up to Window and I go down to Workspace, I'll say Save as New Workspace, and I'll call this one Character Rigging. Click OK, and now I can access that within this menu right here. So I can switch between this and any other workspace just by clicking on it. Now I can import my artwork. So I'll double click on the project panel and find one of the characters. I'm gonna use Reese, so I'll double click on that. And the way we're gonna import this is as a composition. Whether you design your character in Illustrator or Photoshop, either way you're gonna wanna import it as a composition and make sure that you're retaining the layer sizes. So choose layer size as the footage dimensions. Click OK, and that will bring everything in as a comp, all the artwork just how I saw it inside of Illustrator. Now you're going to need Duik Ángela installed on your machine, and if you don't already have it, follow the link in the description, follow the instructions on how to install it, and then we can jump back in. With Duik installed, you can come up to Window and you'll find it in this list. There's a lot of panels that can be installed additionally that allow you to open different parts of Duik as their own panels, but Duik Ángela is what we need. So I'm gonna open that one up. It is a very large script, so it might take a little bit to initially start up, but I wanna quickly point out that I am on version 17.0.0, and inevitably there will be bugs that will be caught. Features might change, labels might change slightly. So if your Duik doesn't look like mine, maybe you're watching this video 6 months or even a year after it was published, check your version against mine down here in the bottom right corner. That might be why. And if there are any frequently asked questions or issues that come up, things that change that I think I should address, I'll put it in a pinned comment down below, maybe also in the description, check both places. But if you have a question, there's a good chance somebody has already asked it, so make sure that you check for a pinned comment or the description first. Now again, if you're brand new to this, I would suggest that you go to the settings, which is in the bottom left corner, go to edit settings and change the UI mode to rookie. If you click on the little hamburger menu, you can see there's rookie, standard, and expert. If you change it to rookie and click apply, this is going to give you text labels on a lot of the buttons where they wouldn't be otherwise. Once you're used to the controls and you understand what the icons mean, then you won't have to rely on these labels and you'll save a little bit more space. But as a beginner, I would encourage you to change that UI to rookie. I'm gonna go ahead and dock that in this section of my workspace right down here in the bottom quadrant so that it stacks with these other two, and I have plenty of room to see everything within Duik. I'm gonna go ahead and save my project, and I'm just gonna work off of the desktop. And I want to point out that my composition defaulted to whatever I had it set up last. So if I go to my composition settings, you'll notice that I'm working at 24 frames per second. You don't have to work at 24 frames per second, change that to whatever you want. But I would suggest that you change the duration to something long, like at least 30 seconds, if not a minute, because you might not know how long the character's animation actually needs to be. It's very unlikely it'll ever need to be 1 minute, but that's kind of just what I default to, so that I have plenty of room to work with and I don't have to extend any layers later on in the process. So this is Duik, and there are so many things that this tool can do other than just rigging your characters. There are features of this script that I haven't ever used, let alone even learned about, so don't be overwhelmed with how much is actually crammed in here. I'm gonna walk you through exactly what you need to do to get up and running and rigging your first character. The first step of the process is to actually create a skeleton for your character, sized to the design that you created so that you can attach all of the artwork to it. And Duik is then going to rig up that skeleton, which is now acting as a parent system basically for your artwork that you can then move around like a puppet. And you can do some really complicated rigging using Duik. You can involve the puppet tool to do much more organic distortions. We're not gonna get into any of that. It's gonna be a very simple, rigid character rig, but it is kind of a long process that you need to follow certain steps in order to get where you wanna be at the end. So I'm gonna walk you through my process and what I think is one of the most efficient ways to get from artwork to a rigged character that you can animate with. One of the biggest new features in Duik Ángela is the introduction of open cutout format Meta-Rigs. Open cutout is a new format created by the developers of Duik that allows you to basically make presets of skeletons for any creatures that you want, compatible with Duik's auto rigging system. So if I click on this button, you'll see that there's lots of different types of creatures in here that we can choose from. So I could go into the bird section and we have a chicken and a rooster. If I go back out, there's a fish, or let's go into the last one. There's a pig character right here. So I'm gonna give it a name. We'll just call this pig Chuck, and then double click on this, and Duik is gonna create all of the bones necessary to make up the skeleton for a pig character. And I can actually make this a little more apparent what's going on if I switch over to the Bones tab, select those bones and go into the settings and enable the envelope. This is going to show you basically a reference of where all of those perfectly circular overlaps are and how the artwork that you designed to fit this skeleton might work. It serves as a really great reference for designing characters, but it's completely customizable. All of these bones are in a parent chain, so you can adjust where they are. Let's say you weren't designing a pig though. Let's get rid of that comp. I'll go back into the Open Cutout tab, jump back out into the hominoid structure. This is what a human is, and we have advanced and simple. I'm just gonna go with simple. Again, double click on it to build all of the bones for that skeleton. And once again, if I enable that envelope, I'll select my bones, go to the bone settings, enable the envelope and apply. This is a really useful tool for being able to create your designs on top of, because you can adjust the proportions of your character and everything in between will update. I could grab this arm, go to the bone envelope effect and change the size. So you could start your character design work inside of After Effects, playing around with a structure and getting it the way that you think you want your character to be designed. Take a screenshot of this, bring it into Illustrator or Photoshop, and design your artwork directly on top of that skeleton. In the future, the developers of Duik want to make this open cutout format available in other software to make this process even simpler, but for now, even just taking a screenshot is such a help in designing your character to fit a Duik Meta-Rig. And the other amazing thing about this is that you can save custom Meta-Rigs, reuse them, share them, so this entire list can grow as you create more characters and as the Duik community contributes to making this a larger library. Now, like I said, I'm not going to be using the open cutout format for this particular character, and it'll make sense why in just a minute, but I'm just gonna go ahead and delete that comp and go into the second tab, which is Bones. And if you've used Duik Basel before, you might be a little bit confused because the terminology has changed a little bit. In Basel, structures was the name of these layers that make up a skeleton. They're now renamed bones because that just makes a little more sense. It's the bones, the literal bones that make up the skeleton of your rig. And bones in Duik Basel are now called pins because once again, it just makes more sense. Bones in Basel really served as pins, so that's why they've been renamed as pins in Duik Ángela. Now I'm gonna go ahead and start creating bones for my Reese character. So I'm gonna close out of my bones settings. And again, I have this list of all different types of creatures. I'm working with a hominoid character, so that's where I'm going to be working. Now, first things first, I'm gonna give my character a name because this will help with labeling. So I'm gonna say Reese as the character, and then just click off for a second. Before I get into any bone creation, I want to first prepare my artwork in the comp. In fact, I want to make a duplicate of this comp so that I can always get back to this in case I ever need to. So I'm just going to rename this one with a 1 at the beginning and say Reese artwork. And then I'll duplicate it and rename this one to Reese bones. Then I'll make sure that I double click that comp so I'm working on it and start making some bone structures. Now you could use that Meta-Rig and put all of your bones in at once and then line up everything to its corresponding part of the character, which is how I used to work with Duik Basil, but with Duik Ángela, I think there's a much faster way. So again, I'm gonna stay in the bones section and I'm going to first just choose, let's say the character's right arm and turn on my guides layer. That way I can see exactly where all of these joints are. What I wanna do is move the anchor point for each one of these layers to their corresponding joints. So for the arm layer, I'll zoom in nice and close. Switch to my anchor point tool with Y on the keyboard, and then click and drag that up to this circle. Now, as I'm dragging this around, the resolution dropped a lot. That's because of the adaptive resolution of After Effects. If I make my workspace a little bit bigger and I click right here, you'll see adaptive resolution is enabled. I'm gonna turn that off. This may decrease performance, but I think it makes it easier to see what I'm doing, so I'm just gonna leave it off, and then I can click and drag this around to move it right in the middle of the circle. Now, if I wanna be super precise, and really with rigging, you should be precise, I'm actually going to right-click on the guides layer, go to create, and say shapes from vector layer, so that this is now an actual shape layer that gives me access to the paths of each one of these circles. Because I have access to those vector shapes, I can actually snap to that artwork. So again, I'm gonna go back to this arm, I'm going to press Y to get my anchor point tool, click and drag the anchor point while holding Control or Command to temporarily enable snapping, and you'll see that it snaps right to the center of that circle. All right, so that's the first step. I'm gonna do the same thing for the rest of the arm. So I'll grab the forearm layer, click and drag this while holding Control or Command. And I wanna point out that sometimes snapping, for whatever reason, just doesn't wanna go where you want it to. So if I zoom in all the way and try again, it might land in the middle, there we go, but that was a struggle. I'm not sure why this is, but every now and then you'll run into that issue and not get it to successfully snap. So what you could do to get around that is just try to eyeball it. And actually this circle right here is a great example. Whatever I do, I cannot get it to snap in the center of that layer. So I could either let go of Control or Command so that snapping isn't a factor and guess where it is, or I could grab that guides layer and search for scale, and every single one of these circles is in a shape group that has transform controls. So I could change the scale of all of these groups if I select all of them, not the transform scale for the layer, but all of the groups, and just change this down to say 20. And now they're gonna be much tinier dots, and I don't have to worry so much about getting it in the center of these circles now as I do just getting my anchor point over that dot. So that's one workaround. Now that I have my anchor points aligned up, I can create bones for that limb, and I can do it in a really intelligent way. I'm gonna start with the part of the limb that's closest to the body, the root of the limb, so the arm, then shift click on the forearm, and then shift click on the hand. So you're starting at the root and working your way to the tip of the limb. With them selected in that order, I can now click on the hominoid section and go to the arm button, but I'm not gonna click on the arm button itself, I'm actually gonna go to the arm options just to show you that you can choose not only how many bones are going to be generated, but also labeling options. So this is on the front side of the body, so I want it to be on the front. It's also the character's right arm, but this is labeled left. So I'm gonna click on it to change it to right, so that it'll be labeled as the front right arm. I don't need a shoulder bone because I don't have that in my artwork, so I'm gonna leave that unchecked. But then I'm gonna click on the arm button, but I'm also going to hold down Control, which is going off the screen a little bit, but if I highlight over that again, holding down Control or Command on a Mac will auto-parent the selection to the new bones. So because I selected these in the correct order, if I hold Control and I click on arm, it's going to generate those bones and align them to the anchor points of that artwork. And I can't overstate how much that simplifies the rigging process. When I don't have to go realign all these bone structures to the artwork, it just makes things go so much quicker. All I need to do is grab the tip of my limb and move it to the tip of the fingers. Since this is an arm that I'm rigging, I'm going to move that to the tip of the fingers. Now, these colors are a little hard to see on top of my particular character art. So what I'm gonna do is select all of those bone layers, which I might point out are named according to the layer type, so bone, the character name that I typed in, Reese, and then the corresponding bone names, as well as their location on the rig. But with them selected, I'll go to my bone settings. I can change their color, I'll uncheck envelope, and I'll just pick a random color until it's something that I like. Maybe this one will look good, and click apply. And now I can see that bone much easier. And not only are the bones aligned with where they need to be according to the artwork has been parented to those bones because of the way that I had them selected from the root to the tip. So I could rotate this bone and the arm is going to rotate with it. We've already got a working FK rig. All right, let me undo that and I'm gonna show you a different method for rigging up the other arm. And to make this easier to see, I'm just going to solo the guides layer, as well as the left hand, forearm, and arm layers, and let's turn on the background. Actually, I'm gonna go to my composition settings, and I'm going to change the background color of my composition to be this light gray. This doesn't actually change anything about my comp other than the preview color for that background. So even with that layer gone, the background will now be light gray instead of black. This doesn't actually affect the render, it's just the preview of the comp when nothing is in the background. Now the second method for creating bones in Duik is to actually draw a path. So I'm gonna switch over to my pen tool and I'm going to add a point on each one of these joint markers. I'm not going to add any curves, but I am gonna finish it off by putting a fourth point at the tip of the limb. Now this is a little bit more difficult to be super precise, so I'm gonna zoom in here. I might even change the width of this down to 1 so I can see that dot nice and clearly, but I wanna put each point of my path right in the center of each one of these joints, and it looks like I was off a little bit. So it is important to get in there and make sure that you're being precise. But now with that path drawn, I can back out of my bone settings, click on hominoid, go into the arm settings, and again, change my labels. This time it's not gonna be on the front, it'll be on the back, and it is the left arm. Duik is intelligent enough to know that I just did the right arm, so the next time I'm probably gonna do the left arm. And actually, I need to make sure that not only is the layer selected, but the path itself is selected. So I'll switch to my pen tool, grab any one of these points, and then click on the arm button. And what Duik is going to do is draw bones aligned to that path using the vertex points as the anchor points for each joint. This is another really fantastic new way of creating bones for your character artwork. I just have to do a little bit more to get things parented to them. You'll also notice that it took the comp name as the character's name. So what I want to do is select these bones. I'll go into my bone settings, and again, let's change the color. Let's apply that first just so it's easier to see. Let's go through until we find something that will stand out nicely. That green, that'll probably work. Okay, next I'll uncheck the color and we'll go to the character's name. This needs to be Reese. I'll apply that, and there we go, the name updates. It is the back left arm, so everything else there looks good. Now the artwork was not automatically parented to the path. As far as I know, that's not possible, but there is a very intelligent way of automatically linking your art to your bones using this link art button. So I'm gonna select these 3 layers, and again, because I labeled these properly, Duik is going to try to guess what bones these should be parented to. So I'll click on the link art button, and if I make this a little bit bigger so we can see, they've now been parented to those bones, and if I rotate the bones, sure enough, everything is parented up with a single button click. Now that did rename my artwork to match kind of the naming structure of everything else. That doesn't really bother me, but you can always rename this back to what it originally was. Now that process did take a few more steps, but I think it's worth knowing about because there are certain situations where maybe you just want to draw that path and create bones very quickly. The next section of my character that I want to focus on is the spine, starting at the hips and moving all the way to the tip of the head. So I'm just gonna solo the layers that I need to see for that, including the guides. And let's see, my neck and the hips. And I don't need to see that arm, so I'll get rid of that. So there we go, we've got the torso and the head of the character. I need to move the anchor points for these layers where I want them to be able to rotate. So for the hips, I want that to be right in between the 2 hip joints, basically. So centered between these 2 dots. The torso, I wanna go right over that dot. The neck layer, I want that to rotate around this dot. and the head I want to go over this point right here. With all of that done, I can treat the spine in the same way that I did with the first arm. I can select them in the order of the root, which would be the hips, all the way to the tip. So I'll grab the hips, then the torso, then the neck, and then the head, exit out of my bone settings, go into the hominoid, this time choose spine into the settings, and this is where I'm going to customize how many layers I want generated. I do want the hips, but I don't need 3 spine sections. There's just one big layer for the torso here, so I'm going to change that down to 1. The neck will also consist of 1. I do want a head bone. So with that done, I'll control click on spine, and this again builds the bones aligned to all of the anchor points. All I have to do is reposition this last point to be the tip of the head, and everything else is parented up except for the artwork that I had not already parented. So let me grab all the facial features and I'll parent that to the head, and I'll grab the neck shadow and parent that to the neck. But now I can grab any one of these bones and rotate this to see if everything is working the way it should. And sure enough, it is working out great. Now I'm just gonna quickly repeat this process for each one of these legs. Again, the process is identical. I'm just going to move the anchor points to the joint markers, generate bones, and automatically have the artwork parented to it. And while you watch me do this, I want to quickly just ask that if you're not subscribed to my channel, click that subscribe button so that you can always be up to date with what I'm putting out there. And if you like the way this tutorial is going, click that like button. Both of those things really help me reach more people here on YouTube, helps me grow my channel so that I can educate more people on how to do cool things like use Duik Ángela. Really appreciate it. Now in the leg settings, I've created this artwork to have toes split off from the foot. So I'm going to make sure that toes is checked. I'm going to change the label from the back to the front, and that will exit me out of that. So I'm going to need to get back into the leg settings. And instead of the left leg, this is the right leg. So I'm going to switch that around, hold down Control and click on leg. Those bones will be generated and aligned to the joints of the artwork. And I can zoom in. The only other thing that is different about the leg from the arms is that we have a toe bone and a heel bone that I need to align in that order. So I'm just gonna grab my toe bone and I'm gonna move that directly on the tip of the toes, and then grab my heel and hold shift so that it only moves horizontally and move it right to the tip of the heel. This is important for how Duik is going to handle the rig for the foot a little bit later. Now I'll just finish this up with the other leg in the exact same way. And with that, my skeleton is complete. I have both arms, both legs, the spine, and we can move on to auto rigging. So I'm gonna once again go back to my project panel and duplicate this comp. I'll rename it 3 Reese Rig. Double click on it to get into that comp, and I no longer need these guide layers, so I'm just gonna go ahead and delete them out of my comp. I don't need this background layer, so I'll get rid of it. And all I have to do to convert this simple parent system into an actual rigged skeleton is select all of the bones, which I can do with this button right here, and then go down to auto rig and click the button. Now Duik is going to warn me this is going to go a lot slower if all of my layer controls are visible, but all I have to do is click on this checkbox and it's going to eliminate all of these overlays. There's lots of shape layers and expressions driving this entire system, and the overlays are what cause After Effects to lag, so that's why we're going to hide them when I click that check mark. And while that happens, I want to encourage you to donate to Dudif, the creator of Duik, who runs RX Labs and makes Duik freely available for anyone who wants to use it. If you use Duik in any kind of creative capacity, it only makes sense to support the creators. And what I like to do is add in a Duik fee to any kind of client work that uses Duik, and the client doesn't have to know about it, but that way there's a constant fund being fed back into the development and improvement of this tool. Thank you so much, Dudif, for all that you do for this community. Keep up the great work. Now I purposely let that play back in real time so you can get a sense for how long it takes, but all things considered, that really wasn't any time at all. And now we have a lot more stuff going on in our comp. The very first thing I want to do is just hide the bones, which since I have my bones panel still open, I can click the show hide bones button. That will eliminate all of the bones since I'm done with them. I don't need to modify them anymore. I don't need to see them. So I'm just going to disable their visibility to help with render time. Now, if I take a look at my layers, I've got a lot more. And if I make a little bit more room for myself, you'll notice that all of these Duik generated layers have tags with the marker system. So it's easy to identify, but it also helps Duik keep track of what's what. So don't modify these markers, leave them as is. But with the color coding and the tagging system, it makes working with these layers much easier. The top set of layers all start with CTRL for control. These are the controllers that drive all of the bones that have now been converted into an actual rigged system. And these are what will drive all of the artwork. If I grab this hand and move it up, you'll see that the arm is now bending the way that you would expect it to just by positioning the hand wherever you want it. I can rotate this hand around. If I use W to switch to my rotation tool, I can grab one of these legs and lift it up to see it bend, rotate the foot around. There's lots of really great stuff. But before you go wild with this, undo back to the initial state. Before anything is changed, select all of your controller layers and press P so that you can see all of these numbers on the position values for all of the controllers are values that you just simply can't memorize. If you ever wanted to get back to this position and you haven't already set keyframes, it's going to be impossible to do that. What I want you to do is select all these layers and deselect the ones that are already zeros, so that would be the torso and the hips, and then come over to your Duik panel, and we're gonna go to this third tab, Links and Constraints, and there's a button in here called Add Zero. When I click on this, Duik is gonna generate nulls that are in the exact same position as each one of these controllers and parent each controller to those nulls so that the relative position between the controller and the null is 0. Meaning I can move this hand wherever I want, and if I want to get back to where it was, all I have to do is put in 0, 0 on the position, and it's right where it should be. That's the first thing I always do after clicking Auto Rig, just so I know that I can always get back to this pose. Next, I want to clean up my comp a little bit because there are just so many layers in here and a lot of them I don't need to see. So what I want to do first is lock all of these bone layers as well as all of the artwork. All of the artwork layers are now being driven by the rig, so I don't need access to them. I just need them to be visible. I also want to shy all of these layers. So I'm going to click and drag all the way down so that nothing but the controllers are unshied, and then I'll click the shy switch. That way I'm not concerned with all of that extra clutter and I can just work with these controllers. Now let's take a look at what these controllers do and what we can do to clean them up a little bit. First of all, there's one right over top of the head. It's a skull icon. This obviously is the head controller, but I don't like it being over top of my character's face. So I'm gonna go into this effect that's on this controller layer, into the icon, and there's a position value. If I change the X position, I can shift this off to the side, and that's typically what I like to do. Since it's over to the side now, I'm not covering up my artwork, but I can still use it to rotate the head around. I can even move the position of it, and the neck will bend around with it. I just need to be careful not to pull it too far because the head will separate from the body, but I'll just undo that. The next controller down the line is the shoulders and neck. What this controller allows you to do is move the shoulders and the joints attached to it around without moving the hips. So the torso is rotating with that shoulders controller, but you'll notice that the head is staying upright and nothing below the hips is changing. Let me undo that and we'll move down to the next controller, which is the torso. Now this is right at the waist basically. I want to move this up, so I'll go into the icon and I'll shift it up on the Y, but that's really difficult to look at, that blue color on top of this salmony pink. So what I want to do is change the color as well. I'm just going to change it to white. This controller is similar to the shoulders, except everything is going to rotate with it. So you see that the neck is pointing wherever I'm moving the torso. The head is staying upright, however, but it's rotating the torso around the hips, right where that anchor point is actually. Next in the controller list is the body controller, and this is kind of the most important one. I'm gonna move it out to the left. I'm going to change its size to be larger, not that large, but maybe something like this. And let's push it out to the left a little bit further. What this controller does is move the entire spine structure. So as I move this around, you'll see that everything in the spine is moving with it. The hips, the torso, the shoulders, and the head all at once. If I rotate it, Everything again is rotating with it, except for the head, which, by the way, if I clicked on the head controller and I collapse this up and we take a look at the last effect in the list, the head follow, if I check that box, now it's going to rotate. So that's an option that you can enable or disable to your taste or to whatever your character needs to do. But this controller is sometimes referred to as the center of gravity. I usually just call it the body controller. But if you want to move your character around, this is how you do it. Don't grab the torso and move it up and down because that's going to mess with the hips. Don't grab the shoulder controller and move it around because that's not going to do anything that you want it to. Use the body controller. All right, I'm going to reset that by bringing up the position and rotation and just zeroing those numbers out. And then the final controller in the spine is the hips. Now that's where I want it to be. What this is going to allow you to do is rotate those hips, again, without rotating any other part of the spine. And that's how I would suggest you use it. Don't grab it to move it around because this is going to cause some issues with other parts of your rig. Use the body controller to move things around instead. Now, to be honest, I don't use the shoulder, torso, or hips controllers very often, and I don't want them cluttering up my character rig, so I'm gonna select all three of them and just turn their visibility off, and I'll even lock them just so I don't accidentally mess with them. Now, as far as the other limbs go, we have the hand controllers, and their icons are defaulted to, again, overlapping the joint, and they're oriented upwards. I'm gonna go into the anchor and I'm gonna rotate it around so it's 180 degrees downwards. It's aligned with my hand now, and then I'll just shift this down as well on the Y-axis. I'll do the same thing for this hand. I'll go in, change the orientation, and shift it down. Now I can grab either one of these hands, pick up the arm, rotate the hand around, and just make sure that my icon is not overlapping the artwork. Now, if you remember back when I was talking about the artwork prep, I put a little bit of a bend into the limb, and that helped Duik to know which way it wanted the limb to bend when it created the rig. But every now and then you will get the bend happening in the opposite direction that you expect it to. To fix that issue, you just need to go into the hand or the foot controller, go into the IK effect, and change the side from 100% to negative 100% or vice versa. This way it will bend in the opposite direction, and maybe you do want it to bend in the opposite direction of the way that you actually drew the artwork. So I could put his hand on his hip there. This way both elbows are bent outwards instead of them both bending to the same direction. Okay, I'll zero those positions back out. And each foot control is very similar, but it does have a few extra features. So first of all, let's change the icon so that it's rotated 90 degrees and then pushed out into the front and maybe below the foot. I'll do the same thing for this one as well. 90 degrees, push it down, and that one I'll actually leave where it is. But this way I can grab each one individually and pick up the legs. Now, some extra controls that each one of these has, if I just spread the legs out a little bit, I'll take a look at these effects, again, giving you the same IK system controls, but the foot roll effect is a really, really great feature and why I separated the toes from the foot in my character artwork. If I grab the foot roll angle and I increase it, you'll see that the character is basically bending up on his toes, lifting the heel but keeping the toes in place. Or if I back it up to a negative direction, it will rotate back on the heel. This is why I had to place the bones for the toes and the heel on those legs. If I undo that, I could also just bend the toes on their own, or I could raise the foot up on a tiptoe without bending. Or I could back up the heel or stretch it downwards, rotating off of that heel's point. These are some very advanced rig controls that are all set up automatically so long as you've prepared your artwork correctly and placed your bones precisely. With all of that done, let's zero out everything. I'll just select everything, press P to bring up all the position and type in 0, 0 so that we're back in our neutral position. Now, one last bit of cleanup that I want to do on my rig. If I zoom in, you'll notice there's a dot on the anchor point of each one of these controllers. On this body, it's hidden by the pants, but there we go. The wrist is right under the watch there, and there's a dot on each one of the shoes. I don't particularly like seeing the anchor point, and it makes the bounding box for selecting the controllers much larger. It contains that dot within it. So what I like to do, and I'll actually unlock all of my controllers to do this, is select all my controllers and then search for size, because there's a property in the icon effect for the anchor point size. So what I want to do is select each one of these with controller command while clicking on each one, And once I have each one of these selected, I can change all of them at the same time to be a value of 0. And as I did that, you saw that the bounding box changed for all these controllers and now only exists around the actual icon with the layers anchor point where that dot was. I think this is just a much cleaner way to work, so it's what I typically do with my controllers. I'll just make sure to lock up these 3 that I'm not using anymore, and this rig is now ready to be animated. Now what I want to do is duplicate that comp one more time, and I'll rename this one for Reese Walk. And we're gonna take a look at one of my very favorite features of Duik, which is the automatic walk or run cycle. So we're gonna switch over to the Automation and Expressions tab. I'm gonna select all of my controllers. Again, I'll need to unlock the ones I'm not using. Even though I don't plan to use them to animate, it is important that they're selected for this part of the process. So I'm gonna select all those controllers, come over to my walk run cycle, and again, I'll click on the settings button instead of clicking the run button so that we can see what's happening. Because of the way that all the layers are named and tagged with markers, Duik is able to identify which controller should be used for each part of the body. For anything that's missing or something that you're not using in your character rig, that'll just be set to none. But this is a way to verify that it's pulling the correct controllers for each part of the body. With that all verified, I'm gonna click on the walk run cycle, and Duik is going to run some magic in the background. My character's pose is going to change, and something really cool is going to happen. Let me make a little bit more room in here so I can actually see my timeline, and I'll actually disable these switches here. And I'll just set my work area to be 1 second. So we'll go to the 23 frame mark, press N to set my work area, and then preview this. And just like that, my character is walking. Not a single keyframe was set by myself, it's just happening. And this is just a mind-blowing thing. If you're new to character animation, believe me, this is not an easy thing to pull off. And the fact that we just clicked a button and the character is now walking is absolutely incredible, but it doesn't stop there. Since I don't need these other controllers, I'm just gonna turn off their visibility for a second and show you that we've got this new one that can be placed anywhere. This is for the walk cycle. There are so many parameters in this effect that allow you to change how the walk actually looks. First and foremost, I want to go all the way down to the bottom into the computation and point out that this is where you're going to find out how long your cycle duration is in both seconds and frames. This is how I knew to set the duration to 1 second. By default, that's how long the loop is going to be of your walk cycle. Changing these other parameters though might change that duration, so if you're ever having trouble finding that loop point, just take a look at the cycle duration in frames and then take 1 frame off of that number for your work area out. So 23 instead of 24, because the 24th frame will be the same as the first frame of the cycle. But let's close that up and just walk through a few of these controls. First, we have general motion, walk, and run. And there are some notes in here to explain what all of this means. But general motion is going to take whatever is being automated and basically just turn it off. So I can dial this back, and we're gonna get back to that neutral pose aside from the arms, but we'll talk about why that is in a second. So if it's at 0, we're not gonna be walking. Or if I go to the walk and I turn that down to 0, same thing, we're gonna get to our neutral pose. However, if I turn run up to 100, then it's going to animate my character in a run cycle instead of a walk cycle. And there are some weird things happening, don't worry about that yet. The point is, general motion will turn both of these off, whereas the walk and run individually will control just those 2 cycles. Next up are the main parameters, and this is where you can change things about your character, like the height, the energy, and the softness. And really the best way to understand what these do is to just get in here and modify them, then play it back to see how it looks. I don't typically touch the height control, but the energy will drastically change your walk. So if I double that number, my character is going to have a lot more movement, a lot more exaggeration as he's walking. If I pause on any one of these frames and increase the softness, you'll notice that that is affecting everything from the torso up. So nothing to do with the legs. I'll leave both of those back to their default and collapse that up and move to the next section, which is walk cycle. Now, this is where we can change how fast the character is walking. So if I go to a frame where the legs are spread out right about there and I change the walk speed, you'll notice that this is actually increasing the distance between steps. But the animation is happening in that same 24 frame cycle. So you might not think of this as walking faster, but because the feet are traveling more distance in the same amount of time, that's exactly what's happening. The other thing the walk speed can change is the direction of the walk. So if your character was facing the other direction and you rigged it up that direction, sometimes your character will be walking in the wrong direction. This is simply corrected by inverting the number. So if I change the walk speed to -100, my character is now gonna walk backwards instead of forwards. So that's how you can correct your walk cycle if your character is moving in the wrong direction. Now the other thing we can change is the walk type. So let me change the walk speed back to 100. I can go from realistic to dancing, and this is gonna have kind of a double bounce walk cycle, which is a little bit more cartoony. It adds more personality. It's really fun. I'm gonna change that back to realistic and close up walk cycle. We'll take a look at the run cycle in a little bit. Next up is the individual limb adjustments. So for the neck and head, I could go in, I could change how much the head is bobbing up and down or how much the neck is swinging back and forth. These are all parameters that influence how the walk cycle happens. They're not used to pose your character. If you want to change the pose of your character, you could re-enable your controllers and change them. So I could grab this position for the body controller and drop it down a little bit, or maybe shift it forward and rotate him forward a little bit. And everything is going to dynamically update. It's not breaking any part of the walk cycle. So I could move his head forward and down a little. I could rotate his head down, and then I could preview one more time, and the walk cycle is going to adapt to whatever I've set. Now, the arms are not swinging the way that I would like them to. I think the front arm is actually okay, but the back arm is going really far back. And you'll notice that the hand controllers here actually aren't moving at all. If I click and drag, they're no longer controlling the limbs. And that's because there are two different systems for driving a limb with Duik, and that's IK or FK, and that stands for inverse kinematics and forward kinematics. You can Google that, find other YouTube videos on what those two things mean if you want specifics. But basically, IK is what allows us, let's say in the rig comp, to just move the hand and have the arm bend and move around the way that you would expect it to. FK, forward kinematics, is basically just a parent chain. And you can see that the IK-FK switch is disabled, meaning that this is now an FK system instead of IK. So if I twirl open FK, there are gonna be keyframes set on all of these properties, but that was just necessary for building the walk cycle. I can actually get rid of them now. What this allows me to do is rotate any one part of this limb to change how it looks, and Duik takes care of the rest. So what I wanna do is actually target the back arm, the left arm, go into that FK settings, remove those keyframes, and then rotate the upper part of the limb forward a bit so that it comes out more on this part of the walk and then doesn't go back quite as far as it swings backwards. So now my arms are a little bit more aligned to where I want them to be as the character is walking. Now, this character's proportions are very exaggerated and he has very long legs. So I would like to see the legs travel more distance, but instead of doing this with the walk speed property, I'm gonna go down into the advanced parameters and find the step amplitude and step frequency. So let's go back to the first frame where the legs are basically at their two extremes. And I'm gonna increase the step amplitude to push the distance between those legs out much further. I'll also disable all these other controllers and play this back just so we can see how the walk cycle has updated. So now he's traveling much more distance, much more quickly. So what I probably want to do is turn the step frequency down to maybe, let's say 70%. So he won't be walking quite as fast. However, that has changed my cycle duration. So let me go into the computation. I'll see cycle duration is now 34 frames. So I'm gonna go to frame 33. We can see the frame number right here, set my work area, and preview that. Now my character's got a nice, easy, long-legged walk cycle. I think that looks really great. But what I am noticing is that when the legs stretch out, they become perfectly straight, and the knees are kind of popping as they go in and out of that straight state, and I wanna try to remedy that a little bit. So let me bring up my body controller, and I'll find a frame where the leg is completely extended. So that's the first frame of the walk cycle. And I'll just click and drag this down a little bit. And I don't wanna shift it too far forward, but maybe somewhere with a balance between these two legs. Because really at this point, I want both legs to be pretty much extended to their extremes. So I did push him forward quite a bit. If I bring up the position for this layer, it's now 86 pixels forward and almost 20 pixels down. But if I play this back, we should see a lot less snapping on the legs. Now it looks like this leg right here on the second and third frames of the walk cycle is getting completely extended. So I'm just gonna drop it down slightly more, maybe move it back a little bit. I'm using my arrow keys to do this, just until we remove that extension of the leg. And I think this is working a little bit better. Obviously, you can play around with this as much as you want to get a pose looking the way that you want it to look. And all these parameters affect each other, so you may have to do a lot of going back and forth to see what creates the best result. But I think this is doing a pretty good job of creating a smooth walk cycle. That's the basic gist of all of the controls of the walk cycle. So now that we know how to do this, let's actually make something happen with our characters. And I want to challenge you to actually do this part of the process and share your work. Tag me at JakeInMotion on Instagram and Twitter so I can see your work and I can share it. You can use the character artwork that I provided in this tutorial as is or modify it, change the hairstyle, change the colors, do whatever you want, but share your work so that I can see it. And go ahead and tag Dudif while you're at it so he can see it as well at RX Laboratory. What I want to do is go into my animation cycles, I'll go to the start of my composition, and I'll set a keyframe on the general motion and press U to bring up that keyframe. I'll zoom in here and move this to the 1 second mark. Then on the first frame, I'm going to change this down to 0%. So what I've effectively done is keyframed on the walk cycle from no walking to walking at 100%. So this is actually going to gradually move the feet and naturally turn into a walk cycle over 1 second. So actually, let's move these keyframes forward 1 second in time so that we have a second of my character not walking before he is walking. The issue is, since I moved the controllers around, he's in a really weird stage without the walk cycle enabled. So what I want to do is line up some keyframes going from my neutral pose to this pose that works with the walk cycle over that same time period. So I'll go to this keyframe where the walk cycle is happening, and I'll set a keyframe on the position for the body controller as well as the rotation for the body controller. Everything else should be zeroed out except for, it looks like, the head. So I'm also going to set a keyframe on the position for that. Let's bring up the rotation and check that as well. The head is also rotated, so I'll set a keyframe there. The arm controllers don't matter, remember, because they're being driven by FK now. And the legs are only showing these numbers because of the expressions that are driving the walk cycle. If I click on either value, you'll see that there is 0, 0. So I haven't shifted those around. So these should be the only keyframes I need for that particular point in time. I'll press U to bring up all of the keyframes, and I can actually get rid of these ones on the hands. So we've got position and rotation keyframes for the body and the head. Then I'll go back to this first keyframe and change these values to 0 on both the position and the rotation for both the body and the head. So we're now back in our neutral position, except for those arms. So once again, let's go back to the second keyframe, into one of the arms, into the FK. I'll set keyframes for the upper, lower, and end, and I'll do that for the other hand as well. Select both layers and press U. This is where I want these values to be set at this point in time. I'll back up to this first pose and then just change these values so that the arm is bent and posed in the way that I want it to be. So arm basically hanging down at rest. That looks pretty good. The back arm is hidden mostly by the torso, but I'll rotate it out just a little bit to give a better silhouette. And now we're going to transition from this pose into the walking pose while also enabling the walk cycle. And I could even easy ease everything. I'll leave the walk cycle as it is, but I'll just easy ease all of the other keyframes. And then I'll play this back so we can see what it looks like resting for 1 second and then transitioning into a walk cycle. That looked really good. Now, why don't we let it walk for a few seconds? So we'll go forward and we'll say, let's walk, walk, walk. Let's say we'll go to about 4 seconds. I'm going to change this from a walk cycle to a run cycle. So I'm going to set a keyframe for both the walk and the run, and then go forward another second. We'll go to 5 seconds in the comp, and I'll just change these two numbers from 100 to 0 and from 0 to 100. And now my character looks like he's ice skating, so I will need to keyframe some other things, but we've transitioned now from walking to running, and it looks pretty wacky. If I play this back, the limbs are gonna separate, his legs are rotating way too much, but we can remedy this. So let's also go into maybe the step amplitude and keyframe that. So let's set a keyframe right there for step amplitude, and then we'll go forward, and the legs are just separating way too much here, so let's bring that in. Maybe we'll go all the way back down to 100 and we'll see what that looks like. So I'll just set my work area to only preview the run cycle and play this back. And that was probably a little bit too much. So let's bring that back up a little bit so the amplitude brings the legs out a little bit more. And I think the step frequency is also going to need to change. So let's keyframe that from 70 back up to 100 so that the cadence of the running actually matches the motion a little bit more. That's looking pretty good. Maybe bring down the amplitude a little bit. So I'll say 150 instead of 180. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. Maybe I'll keyframe the pose of the body controller a little bit. So let's grab that body controller, set some keyframes so that they're holding until this point, and then go forward and we'll rotate it down a little bit more and drop the body down a little bit more so he's lower to the ground. It might be a little bit too low. And there's some weird stuff going on with the feet, so I think we're going to need to modify that a little bit. So let's go into the animation cycles, down into the leg section and find the feet rotation. Maybe we'll just keyframe this from 100% down to maybe 50%, somewhere around there. That looks pretty good. And let's play that back. Yeah, that's working pretty well. Maybe I'll shift his body forward even further and rotate it down more. I think that looks great. So why don't we have him run for a couple of seconds? So we'll say he's running, running, running. And then maybe right around, let's see, the 7-second mark, we'll keyframe the general motion as well as any keyframes on the controllers. So I'll just click and drag all the way down. And then we'll go forward, let's say 2 seconds this time. So we'll go to the 9-second mark and we'll have him stop running and stop moving altogether. So we'll keyframe the general motion down to 0, and then we'll copy and paste the initial set of keyframes for the controllers. Now, I can't select all these keyframes and copy and paste because that will paste new layers, but there's a really cool feature of Duik under the animation tab called copy animation and paste animation that lets us copy and paste these keyframes. So with them selected across multiple layers, I'll say copy animation, and then I'll say paste animation, and that will paste right where my playhead is. And now we're gonna go back to where we were originally at the start of our comp so that this loops seamlessly. All right, let's set our work area and preview the entire sequence. I'll turn off the controller so we just see the character, and we'll see him rest for a second, transition into a walk for a couple of cycles, then transition into the run for a couple of cycles before coming to a resting point again and looping seamlessly. Now this might seem like a really complex process, but believe me, it's way more complicated to do all of this manually, setting keyframes for every single one of these cycles, transitioning between them, gradually transitioning from one cycle to another. It's not easy, it's very time consuming. And while you do have much more control keyframing all of this by hand, if you're in a pinch and you need to get something done quickly, maybe it's a background character or the main character even, you can really get away with a lot using this automatic walk and run cycle system. But that is my Duik Ángela Jumpstart tutorial. I realize this is a ridiculously long video, but there's just so much to know about Duik, and even just getting into the basics takes a lot of understanding. So I hope you got a lot out of this video. If you did like it, please don't forget to like the video, subscribe if you're not already, leave a comment down below with any questions or comments, anything that you'd like to learn more about Duik. I'd be happy to make more content on this subject. If you use any of the techniques that I taught you, please tag me at JakeInMotion on Instagram, on Twitter, anywhere that you can so that I can see and share your work. And please share this video with other people that you think might like it. If you're interested in more tutorials like this one, then please consider becoming a patron over on Patreon. You can click on the card above to take you over there. Thank you so much to my patrons for all of your continued support. It means the world to me. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next one.